This 1990 Surf 3 concept was built in conjunction with Lotus to explore future levels of performance. Surf 3, more of a road car than a track performer, was intended as a development vehicle to evaluate mid-engine structures.
This is the most incredible Corvette that never made it into production. What we're looking at here is the Surf 3, the Chevrolet Engineering Research Vehicle 3. It's not a great name, but this is one of Chevrolet's prototypes of a mid-engine Corvette from the late 80s. It was deemed a 1990 model year. And unlike most one-off concept cars, this thing runs, drives, and performs like it should with a fully finished interior. And if you didn't know better, you thought this car would be production ready. This is such an interesting car, and in this video we're going over some of the crazy engineering and cool gadgets and gizmos behind it. Now the Surf 3 was the third in a line of mid-engined Corvette concepts, starting with the first model and the second and the third, and it never made it into production. Part of the reason I've heard is because it would have just been too expensive to build. I've heard estimates about $300,000 to $400,000 per unit if they were to sell this car, but it is one of the best designs, one of the coolest looking cars, and one of the best performers of the late 80s and early 90s. So let's talk about the engineering. Zora Zontoff was a Corvette engineer, the grandfather of the Corvette, and he had dreamed of doing a mid-engine Corvette for decades. That's why he did the concepts. And this is the last in that line after, I think after he was done with Chevrolet. This was not under his lead. But what we're looking at here is an LT5 powered Corvette. So the LT5 was the dual overhead cam engine developed in partnership with Lotus that was used in the ZR1, the legendary ZR1 in the C4 generation of Corvette. Except they've added a couple of turbos to that engine. So if you remember, that engine made about 400 horsepower, but with the two turbos, Chevrolet rated this engine at 650 horsepower, and I heard there's a super secret overboost function that will boost it up to 800 plus horsepower. That was insane power for 1990, and Chevrolet said that that would propel this car, which weighs around 3,000 pounds, from 0 to 60 in right about 3.5 seconds. Now that would be impressive in 2023. This is a 1990. I mean, that's incredible. This is performance that's matched by the new C8 Corvette in 1990, which is just berserk. Now, this car sends its power to all four wheels. So the C8 Corvette launched in rear-wheel drive, the new E-Ray is all-wheel drive, but this car has a torque vectoring all-wheel drive system, and what we're looking at here is magnesium wheels. So they look like the standard C4 wheels, but they're actually magnesium. They're individual to each side of the car, so the little arrow design points the same way, left and right, so you have to make sure you put the wheels on the right direction in this car. And behind those wheels are aviation-inspired disc brakes. This car is running 8 discs on it, with calipers, of course, throughout the vehicle, but 8 discs, 2 on each corner. And I'm told that it works pretty darn well, but imagine how fantastically expensive that would be to produce. I wish you could see the brake design. They're kind of hidden behind these wheels. But what's cool about this car is I was just speaking with one of the gentlemen responsible for the Heritage Collection. They actually got this car running and driving. So they guess it took a lot of work to get it back up to snuff. Of course, it was a concept car. It spent most of its time sitting in a museum, but it does in fact run and drive. They had to rebuild the turbos. It's got 14 computers in this car, so there's a lot of electronics, but the car is operational. And it's very finished. So most concept cars I interact with, and I interact with quite a few of them, are basically clay or foam or wood or chunks of plastic, because they're just intended to look good. But this car was intended to drive, and this is why I hypothesize they were considering it for production. So everything from the stocks to the gauges to the dials work and are functional and look pretty darn close to production ready. Now let me take the camera from you, Ian. I want to talk about some really interesting things in here. First of all, it's got 2 screens. That top screen is an early version of navigation. So this car had a cassette-based navigation system. You'd use these little cassettes, put them in the car to activate the nav, and then the bottom screen would have showed kind of some stats on the car, some gauges and that kind of thing. It does have a CD player for the late 80s. That was insane. And then all of these buttons, over 15 buttons down the center of the car, are for the seats. believe it or not, 15 individual seat controls, and that right there, a 3-speed hydromatic transmission. So not a super super advanced transmission. I love these window controls. You can slide them to the position that you want the window to go to, and these gauges. Look at the gauges: volts, temperature, miles per hour. 220 is what they said this car would do, and that's what the speedometer goes to. Apparently they did it. It's got the boost gauge for the twin turbos, temperature. Absolutely incredible interior. Layback bucket seats. This thing is fantastically cool, and the design is beautiful. It's got the pop-up headlights from a Firebird-ish. Apparently, the mechanism is from a Firebird. And there's, of course, little bits and bobs that are used in other cars, but for the most part, everything on this car was bespoke. This thing would have been so phenomenally expensive if they had put it into production, but think about the supercars that it could have rivaled back in the day, especially if they built it with this insane LT5 twin-turbo V8, by the way, which was developed in part with Lotus. Insane cars like everything from the Diablo. It's got like a little bit of a Vector vibe going to it, and it's just stunningly beautiful, and I love that it runs. But I wanted to give you a kind of a quick glimpse behind this really interesting piece of history that Chevrolet has brought out here to the launch of the E-Ray Corvette. Kind of show you around a little bit. We got an exhaust clip. They started it up for us so we could see. And it previewed a lot of the technologies we see in new cars. Like, Ian, come check this out. The continuous light bar, right? The tail light that goes over the entire width of the car. Look at this down here. Parking sensors. These little guys are parking sensors, little beepers that let you know when you're about to approach something behind you. I mean, it's just a gorgeous piece of design. And of course, that did eventually translate 30 years later into what we know today as the C8 Corvette. So eventually Zora's dreams did come true. Chevrolet did produce a mass market Corvette. Doesn't have twin turbos. The standard car doesn't have all-wheel drive, but the E-Ray does. Of course, it's got more than 3 speeds now, which is probably for the better. And it's, you know, I kind of like the design of the old one a little more. This one's a little too angular, a little too busy for me, but ultimately his dreams were realized. But guys, I mean, what a unique opportunity to get up close and personal with what is really a one-off concept car. I'd love to know your feedback. Should Chevrolet have built this? I mean, $300,000 to $400,000 in 1990 is phenomenally expensive. But imagine even if they had built 1020, kind of like a low production car like what Ford is doing with the Mustang GTD, people would have flocked all over these. I really do think that they could have done it. And nowadays, this car, even with limited production, would be worth $500,000, $1 million. This is a one-off, so it's priceless, but very cool. Look at these seatbelts too, Ian. I didn't even notice these seatbelts the first time I looked at it. These dual seatbelts that kind of cross over your chest like that. That's really cool. Really hard to get in and out of, that's for sure. But look at that interior design. The only production part I understand on the inside is the stocks, like the steering column, and then the C4 Corvette wheel. Anyway, folks, just a quick walk around of a phenomenally rare beast. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. This has been Tommy, behind the camera Ian. We got more videos on the E-Ray, the standard C8 on the next round. We'll see you soon.